Golden chandeliers don't hide ugly souls. At the most exclusive gala of the year, the room was filled with billionaires, but the poorest person there was the only one with a heart. When Serena, a struggling waitress desperate to pay her mother's medical bills, saw the terrifying Mafia Don's autistic son rocking back and forth alone, she didn't see a freak like the wealthy elites did. She saw a human being in pain. Ignoring her manager's vicious warning to stay away, she offered her hand. That single forbidden dance didn't just silence the mocking crowd, it unleashed a chain of events that would topple an empire of arrogance and reveal a secret the Don had killed to keep. Rain lashed against the service entrance of the Grand Oak Haven Hotel, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled perfection inside. Serena Moore shivered, clutching her thin cardigan tighter around her chest before pushing through the heavy steel doors. The smell of dishwater and industrial sanitizer hit her instantly, a familiar assault on her senses. "You're late, Moore." The voice was like grinding gravel. Preston Walsh, the banquet manager, stood by the time clock, tapping a manicured finger against his clipboard. He was a man who wore suits that cost more than Serena's annual rent, yet he possessed the soul of a petty tyrant. "The bus broke down on 4th Avenue, Mr. Walsh. I ran the last 6 blocks, Serena explained, breathless, shaking the water from her hair. She glanced at the clock. "I'm only 2 minutes past shift start." 2 minutes is money, Preston sneered, making a violent check mark on his paper. "That's coming out of your tips, and tonight you need to be invisible. We have the Moretti booking." The kitchen staff, usually a cacophony of shouting chefs and clattering pans, went silent at the name. Moretti. Lachlan Moretti. The name belonged to the city's Shadow King. Legally, he was a shipping magnate and a philanthropist. In reality, according to the whispers that circulated through the darker streets of the city, he was the reason certain people disappeared and why the docks were never inspected by customs. "The Don is here?" whispered Tina, another server, her eyes wide as she polished a silver tray. "He bought out the entire Sapphire Ballroom for his foundation," Preston hissed, stepping closer to the group of servers. "Listen to me closely. You do not speak to him. You do not look him in the eye. And above all, you do not react to the disturbances." Serena tied her apron, wincing as the knot pressed against a bruise on her hip, a souvenir from dodging a cyclist earlier that week. "Disturbances?" she asked softly. Preston rolled his eyes. "His son. The boy is defective. He makes noises. He flaps his hands. If he acts up, you ignore it. If he breaks a glass, you clean it up without a word. If you offend Lachlan Moretti, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work in this state again. Now, get the champagne flutes. Move." The threat hung heavy in the air. For Serena, losing this job wasn't an option. Her mother's dialysis treatments at St. Jude's Hospital cost $3,000 a month after insurance. Every shift, every tip, every stolen moment of overtime was the difference between life and death. She swallowed her pride, nodded, and grabbed a tray of crystal glasses. Inside the Sapphire Ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly opulent. Tables were draped in silk, and the centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids imported from Singapore. The guests began to filter in, the city's sharks in tuxedos and gowns. Serena moved through the crowd like a ghost, offering champagne with a practiced plastic smile. She recognized faces from the tabloids. There was Veronica St. Clair, an heiress known more for her cruel insults than her charity work. Beside her stood Trey Kensington, a hedge fund manager who had once tipped Serena a fake lottery ticket as a joke. "Champagne?" Serena offered, keeping her head lowered. Veronica didn't even look at her. She just snatched a glass. God, the air conditioning is pathetic in here. Do they let just anyone work the floor? Trey laughed, a hollow, barking sound. Careful, V. Don't catch poverty. Serena tightened her grip on the tray, her knuckles turning white. For Mum, she repeated internally. Just do it for Mum. Then, the double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter died instantly, replaced by the rustle of silk as people turned to look. Lachlan Moretti walked in. He was a mountain of a man, wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like armor. His face was a map of sharp angles and scars, his eyes dark and scanning the room for threats. Flanking him were 4 security guards, massive men who looked ready to snap necks. But it was the figure beside Lachlan that caught Serena's attention. Clinging to the Mafia boss's sleeve was a young man, perhaps 20 years old. He wore a tuxedo that seemed uncomfortable on him. He was handsome, with soft features that contrasted his father's hardness, but his eyes were darting wildly around the room. He wasn't looking at people. He was looking at the chandeliers, his fingers rapidly tapping against his thigh in a rhythmic pattern. This was Leo, the defective son Preston had warned them about. Serena watched from the shadows near the kitchen door. She didn't see a defect. She saw someone drowning in sensory overload. The lights were too bright, the music too loud, the perfume too strong. She recognized the look because she had seen it in her own cousin years ago. Keep moving more, Preston whispered aggressively into her ear, appearing out of nowhere. Stop staring, you want to get us all killed? The gala progressed, a parade of speeches and self-congratulation. The wealthy patrons wrote checks to look good, clinking glasses and laughing loudly. But at the head table, the mood was different. Lachlan sat stiffly, sipping water. He spoke to no one. Beside him, Leo had abandoned his food. The young man had taken 3 forks and was arranging them in a precise triangle on the tablecloth. He would tap the left fork, then the right, then the top, humming a low, monotonous note. Mom. It was quiet, but in the lull of conversation, it carried. At the adjacent table, Veronica St. Clair leaned over to Trey. Look at him, she sneered, not bothering to lower her voice. It's embarrassing. You'd think with all that blood money, Lachlan could afford a private institution to keep him in. Trey snickered, swirling his scotch. Maybe he thinks the boy is a pet, like a trained monkey. Hey, watch this. Trey picked up a bread roll and tossed it. It wasn't a hard throw, but it was accurate. The roll bounced off the table right in front of Leo, disrupting his triangle of forks. Leo flinched violently. The rhythm was broken. His humming stopped, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. He looked at the forks, then at the bread roll, distress washing over his face. He began to rock back and forth in his chair, harder this time. Fix, 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 Leo muttered, his voice rising in pitch. His hands flew up to cover his ears, trying to block out the sudden laughter from Veronica's table. Lachlan Moretti hadn't seen the throw. He had been turned away speaking to a security guard, but he heard his son's distress. He whipped around, his eyes narrowing. Leo? What is it? But Leo was spiraling. The disruption of his pattern, combined with the sensory assault of the room, was pushing him toward a meltdown. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over with a loud crash. The ballroom went silent. No, no, no! Leo shouted, spinning in a circle, his hands flapping by his sides. Wrong, it's wrong! Preston, the manager, froze near the buffet. He looked terrified, but he made no move to help. The guests stared with a mixture of pity and disgust. Veronica laughed again. Oh, look, the show is starting. Serena was standing 10 feet away, holding a pitcher of water. She felt a surge of rage, so hot it almost blinded her. These people had everything: money, power, status, yet they lacked the basic decency to treat a human being with respect. She looked at Lachlan. The terrifying Mafia Don looked helpless. He reached for his son, but Leo pulled away, terrified of being touched while in this state. Lachlan's security guards stepped forward, but they didn't know what to do. They knew how to break bones, not how to soothe a panic attack. "Get him out of here!" Lachlan barked to his men, his voice tight with humiliation and worry. "Take him to the car!" "No car! No car!" Leo screamed, dropping to his knees and covering his head. "Lights! Too loud! Pattern broken!" The whispers grew louder. "What a freak," someone muttered. Serena couldn't take it anymore. She set the water pitcher down on a service station with a definitive clink. "More, don't you dare!" Preston hissed, grabbing her arm. "You stay right here. Let security handle the retard." Serena ripped her arm away from Preston's grip. "He's not a retard. He's overwhelmed." Ignoring Preston's spluttering threats of termination, Serena walked out onto the floor. The click of her sensible work shoes on the marble sounded like gunshots in the silence. She walked past the gaping billionaires, past the smirking Veronica, and straight toward the most dangerous man in the city. Lachlan's hand went to the inside of his jacket. A reflex. His guards tensed, stepping in her path. "Let me through," Serena said, her voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. "I can help him." Lachlan looked at this tiny waitress in her cheap uniform. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else. Determination. He signaled his guards to stand down. Serena knelt on the floor, 3 feet from Leo. She didn't touch him. She didn't shout. She lowered her head until she was in his line of sight. "Leo," she said softly. Leo was rocking, eyes shut tight. "Broken. Broken. Triangle broken." "We can fix the triangle," Serena whispered. She reached into her apron pocket. She didn't have forks, but she had 3 packets of sugar she had saved for her break. She placed them on the floor. 1, 2, 3. "Look," she said. Leo opened one eye. He saw the packets. "Is this a good triangle?" she asked. Leo paused. His rocking slowed. He reached out a trembling hand and nudged the top packet 2 millimeters to the left. "Equilateral?" he murmured. "Perfect," Serena smiled. "Equilateral." The room was dead silent. Even Veronica had stopped smiling. But Leo was still agitated. The energy in his body was too high. He needed to release it. He started tapping his chest. "Too much noise," Leo whispered. "I know," Serena said. She stood up slowly and extended her hand, not to grab him, but as an offer. "Leo, do you know how to count to 3? He looked up at her, confused. "Yes. 1, 2, 3. Fibonacci sequence is better. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. 3 is good for now," she said. She began to sway, very gently. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Like a pendulum. Like a clock. It wasn't a ballroom dance. It wasn't a waltz. It was a rhythmic grounding exercise. Leo watched her. The repetition soothed him. He stood up, mirroring her sway. "Pendulum," he said. "May I?" Serena asked, gesturing to his hand. Leo hesitated, then placed his hand in hers. His palm was sweating. Serena began to hum. It wasn't a song, just a low, steady tone that matched the frequency he had been making earlier. She led him in a slow, small circle. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. For a full minute, the only movement in the Sapphire Ballroom was the waitress and the Mafia Don's son, swaying in a tiny, safe universe of their own making. Leo's breathing slowed. His shoulders dropped. The panic receded, replaced by focus on the numbers. 1, 2, 3, Leo whispered. a small smile touching his lips. Serena looked up and locked eyes with Lachlan Moretti. The Don looked stunned. For the first time all night, his hand wasn't near his weapon. He looked at Serena with an expression that terrified her more than his anger would have. Absolute, undivided attention. Then, the spell was broken. "Well, isn't that sweet?" Veronica's voice cut through the air like a knife. "The help found a boyfriend. They seem on the same intellectual level." The insult hung in the air, toxic and sharp. Leo faltered in his step. The rhythm threatened again. But Serena squeezed his hand firmly. "Focus on me, Leo. 1, 2, 3. Ignore the static. It's just white noise." "White noise?" Leo repeated, blocking Veronica out. "Low frequency. Irrelevant." Lachlan Moretti turned slowly toward Veronica's table. The movement was predatory. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and stared at her. The color drained from Veronica St. Clair's face. She had insulted people her whole life without consequence, but she suddenly realized she had just kicked a hornet's nest the size of a city block. Her date, Trey, suddenly found his shoes very interesting. Lachlan turned back to Serena. He walked over, his massive presence dwarfing her. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was deep, resonating in his chest. "Serena. Serena Moore, sir." "Serena Moore." He tested the name, filing it away. "You have done something no one else could do. My own doctors struggle to calm him this quickly." "He just needed a pattern, sir." "And respect," she added, daring a glance at the wealthy guests. "He's not deaf. He hears everything." Lachlan nodded solemnly. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a heavy black business card with gold embossing. It had no address, just a name and a number. "If you ever need anything," Lachlan said, loud enough for Preston to hear from the sidelines, "you call this number. Anything." He turned to his son. "Leo, are you ready to go?" Leo nodded, still holding Serena's hand for a second longer than necessary. 1, 2, 3. Good triangle. Goodbye, Serena. "Goodbye, Leo," she smiled. Lachlan placed a hand on Leo's shoulder and guided him toward the exit. As he passed Preston, the Don stopped. He didn't look at the manager. He just spoke to the air. "This woman," Lachlan gestured vaguely behind him, "is the only reason I am not burning this building down tonight. Remember that." Preston gulped, nodding so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. "Yes, Mr. Moretti. Of course, Mr. Moretti." As the double doors closed behind the Moretti entourage, the tension in the room snapped. The chatter returned, louder than before, frantic and gossipy. Preston marched over to Serena. His face was purple with a mix of relief and fury. "You reckless little idiot," he hissed, grabbing her arm again, harder this time. "I told you to be invisible. You made a scene with the most dangerous man in the city." "I helped him," Serena argued, pulling away. "He was grateful." "Grateful?" Preston laughed cruelly. "Men like Moretti aren't grateful. They see debt. You just entangled yourself in his web. And worse, you embarrassed our VIP guests. Mrs. St. Clair is furious." "Mrs. St. Clair is a bully," Serena shot back. "Mrs. St. Clair spends $50,000 a year at this hotel," Preston shouted. "Get out. You're done for the night. Clock out. And don't expect to be on the schedule next week until I decide if you're worth the trouble." "You can't suspend me. I need this week's pay," Serena pleaded, the reality of her mother's medical bills crashing back down on her. "Get out." Preston pointed to the service doors. Humiliated, Serena fled the ballroom. She rushed through the kitchen, ignoring the stares of the other staff, and burst out into the rainy alleyway. She leaned against the brick wall, sliding down until she hit the wet pavement, burying her face in her hands. She had done the right thing. She knew she had. So why was she the one being punished? She cried for 5 minutes, the rain masking her tears. She didn't hear the black SUV roll up silently to the curb of the alley. She didn't notice the window rolling down until a voice spoke. Not the gravelly voice of Preston, but a smooth, dangerous baritone. "The car is dry, Miss Moore, and I believe we have matters to discuss." Serena looked up. It was one of Moretti's guards, the driver. But in the back seat, barely visible through the tint, was the silhouette of the Don himself. "Get in," the driver said. It wasn't a request. Terrified, but having no other options, and remembering the card Lachlan had given her, Serena opened the back door and climbed into the scent of expensive leather and cigar smoke. Lachlan sat there, watching her. Leo was in the seat beside him, wearing noise-cancelling headphones, happily playing with a Rubik's Cube. "My manager fired me," Serena blurted out, her anxiety spilling over. "Or suspended me. I don't know, but I can't lose that job." Lachlan didn't blink. "Preston Walsh is a cockroach. You don't work for him anymore." "I have to," she insisted. "My mother is sick. I have bills." Lachlan leaned forward into the light. The scar on his cheek twisted as he smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Serena, you calmed my son when a room full of civilized people treated him like an animal. You are under my protection now. And as for your job, I have a different proposition. One that pays significantly more than serving champagne to idiots." He paused, letting the weight of the offer settle. "But," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "it requires discretion, because if you accept, you will be entering my world, and in my world, there is no clocking out." Serena looked at Leo, who solved the cube and looked up at her, smiling innocently. Then she looked at Lachlan, the man who held the city's throat in his hand. "What do I have to do?" she asked. Lachlan sat back. "Someone in that ballroom gave up my location to a rival family tonight. I saw them texting. I need eyes inside that hotel. Someone no one notices. Someone they treat like furniture. I need you to be my spy, Serena." The next morning, Serena returned to the Grand Oakhaven Hotel. Her stomach was twisted into tight knots, but the heavy envelope of cash sitting in her bedside drawer, an advance from Lachlan, gave her the steel spine she needed. It was enough to cover 3 months of her mother's treatment. She walked through the service entrance. The time clock clicked. 7:59 a.m. Preston Walsh was waiting for her. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon whole. His face was pale, and his hand shook slightly as he adjusted his tie. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery terror that made him sweat despite the air conditioning. "Moore," he croaked. "You're back." "Mr. Moretti said there wouldn't be a problem with my schedule," Serena said, her voice steady. She unlocked her locker and pulled out her apron. Preston flinched at the name. "No problem. In fact, you're assigned to the penthouse suites today. Room service and housekeeping oversight for the VIP guests." It was a promotion. Usually it took 5 years to get the penthouse clearance. But Serena knew this wasn't Preston's doing. It was Lachlan's unseen hand-moving chess pieces. "Thank you, Preston," she said coolly. Just do your job," Preston muttered, backing away. "And for God's sake, don't mention my name to anyone." Serena took the service elevator to the top floor. The penthouse level was a different world. The carpets were thicker, the silence deeper. This was where the city's elite conducted their darkest business, assuming their wealth bought them privacy. Her target was Suite 4002. Lachlan had told her that Trey Kensington was hosting a private poker game there. Trey wasn't just a rude hedge fund manager. Lachlan suspected he was the conduit, the man laundering money for the rival faction that had threatened Leo. Serena pushed her cart, laden with silver platters of sandwiches and whiskey. She knocked on the mahogany door. "Room service," she called out. "Come in, but be quick," Trey's voice shouted from inside. Serena entered. The suite was filled with smoke. Trey sat at a round table with 3 other men. 2 were unrecognizable suits, but the third man sent a chill down Serena's spine. He was older, with silver hair and a scar running through his eyebrow. He spoke with a heavy, deliberate accent. "Leave the cart," Trey snapped, not looking up from his cards. "And get out." Serena nodded, keeping her head down. She began to unload the plates, moving as slowly as she dared. "The shipment docks on Thursday," the silver-haired man said, his voice low. "If Moretti's customs contacts are still in place, we have a problem." "Moretti is distracted," Trey laughed, throwing a chip into the pot. "He's too busy babysitting his retard son. The man is soft. He's spent a fortune on doctors. I tell you, the lion has lost his teeth." Serena gripped the water pitcher. "Leo is smarter than all of you combined," she thought furiously. "Don't underestimate him," the silver-haired man warned. "And this inside man you promised? Is he reliable?" "He's greedy," Trey sneered. "That makes him reliable. He controls the staff, the schedules, the cameras. He'll clear the path for your team during the masquerade ball." Serena froze. The masquerade ball was in 2 days. It was the biggest event of the season. Lachlan was attending. "Hey!" Trey barked. Serena jumped. He was looking at her now, eyes narrowing. "Why are you still here? I said get out." "Just pouring the water, sir," Serena said, her voice trembling just enough to sound like a terrified servant. Trey stared at her for a long second. Then he smirked. "Wait. You're the girl from the gala, the one who danced with the freak." The room went silent. The silver-haired man looked at her with shark-like eyes. "Is she a problem?" the man asked, his hand drifting toward his jacket. "Her?" Trey laughed. "No, she's a charity case. Moretti probably gave her a tip and sent her on her way. Get lost, darling. Go count forks or whatever you do." Serena scurried out of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She made it to the service elevator and hit the button for the basement. She pulled the burner phone Lachlan had given her from her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely type. Thursday. The masquerade ball. Someone on the inside is clearing security. They think you're weak. She hit send. Seconds later, the phone buzzed. "Come to the estate tonight. Bring the boy a blue triangle." The Moretti estate was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. High walls, iron gates, and security cameras that tracked every blade of grass. When the car dropped Serena off, she was escorted not to an office, but to a massive sunroom at the back of the house. It was filled with light, plants, and canvases. Leo was there. He was painting. It wasn't a child's finger painting. It was an intricate, geometric masterpiece. Thousands of tiny triangles in varying shades of blue, interlocking to form a chaotic yet perfect ocean. "The pattern is stable," Leo said without turning around. He knew she was there. The waitress, Serena. "Hello, Leo," Serena said softly. She remembered the text. She reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of blue origami paper she had folded into a perfect equilateral triangle during her bus ride. "I brought this." Leo turned. His eyes lit up. He took the paper, inspected the angles, and smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile that transformed his face. "Acceptable," he said. He placed it on the table next to his brushes. "You fit the sequence." Lachlan stepped out from the shadows of the doorway. He was dressed casually in a cashmere sweater, looking less like a mob boss and more like a tired father, but the intensity in his eyes remained. "You said they mentioned an inside man," Lachlan said, skipping the pleasantries. "Did they name him?" "No," Serena replied, watching Leo paint. "But they said he controls the staff and the cameras, and Trey said he was greedy." Lachlan poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Serena. "That narrows it down. Only 3 people have access to the security feeds at the Oak Haven: the head of security, the general manager, and your friend Preston." "Preston," Serena whispered. It made sense. Preston's desperation for money, his cruelty, his willingness to abuse power. "I will handle Preston," Lachlan said darkly. "No," Serena interrupted. Lachlan looked at her, surprised. "No? If you move on Preston now, they'll know you know," Serena reasoned, her mind racing. "They'll call off the attack or change the plan. You have to let the trap spring, but you have to change the ending." Lachlan studied her. He took a sip of wine, impressed. "You think like a strategist, Serena. Not a waitress. I grew up in a neighborhood where you had to be smart to survive," she said. "And I want to help Leo. If they hurt you, he has no one." Lachlan looked at his son, who was humming a soft tune, lost in his blue world. "He has no mother. She died when he was born. The doctors told me to institutionalize him. They said he would never speak, never connect. I fired them all. I built this world for him." He stepped closer to Serena. The air between them crackled with a sudden, unexpected tension. "You are the first outsider he has let in, the first one who didn't look at him with pity." "He doesn't need pity," Serena said, holding his gaze. "He sees things we miss. He sees the truth." Leo suddenly stopped painting. He dropped his brush. "Red," Leo said loudly. "Red in the blue. Bad contrast. Bad data." Lachlan frowned. "What is it, Leo?" Leo pointed at the window. Beyond the glass, down the long driveway, the headlights of a delivery truck were approaching the gate. "Wrong time," Leo muttered, rocking slightly. "Delivery schedule is Tuesday, Friday. Today is Wednesday. Wrong pattern." Lachlan's eyes widened. He tapped his earpiece. "Security, who is at the gate?" "Just a flower delivery, boss." The guard's voice crackled. "For the ball." "Turn them away," Lachlan barked. "Now!" Boom! The explosion shook the ground. The delivery truck at the gate didn't wait to be turned away. It detonated. The blast blew the iron gates off their hinges and shattered the windows in the front of the house. The sunroom glass held. It was bulletproof, but the shockwave knocked Serena to the floor. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. "Leo!" Lachlan roared, diving to cover his son's body with his own. Serena scrambled up. "We have to move. They aren't just sending a message. They're here." Gunfire erupted from the driveway. A team of men in black tactical gear was swarming through the smoke of the burning truck. The syndicate wasn't waiting for the ball. They were striking now. "The safe room!" Lachlan shouted. He grabbed Leo, who was screaming, his hands over his ears. "Leo, look at me! Count! Count with me!" "Too loud! Chaos! Chaos!" Leo shrieked, fighting his father's grip. Serena grabbed Leo's other hand. She squeezed it hard. "Leo, the Fibonacci sequence! Go! 1!" She shouted over the gunfire. Leo gasped. 1, 2, 3. They ran. Lachlan led them through the hallway, his gun drawn. 2 of his guards appeared, returning fire at the intruders breaching the front door. "Get them to the library," a guard shouted, before taking a bullet to the shoulder. They burst into the library. Lachlan shoved a heavy bust of Julius Caesar, and a bookshelf swung open to reveal a steel door. They tumbled inside, just as bullets chewed up the wood frame behind them. The steel door slammed shut, sealing them in silence. The safe room was a bunker. Monitors lined the wall, showing the chaos outside. Lachlan's men were fighting back, repelling the attackers. Lachlan checked Leo for injuries. The boy was curled in a corner, rocking violently. He's in shock, Lachlan said, his voice breaking. He looked at Serena. She had a cut on her forehead, blood trickling down her face. He reached out and gently wiped it away with his thumb. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine," she breathed. They knew. How did they know to hit the house tonight? Lachlan looked at the monitors. The attackers were retreating, realizing the target was secure. He saw a face on one of the cameras, a man directing the retreat. It was the silver-haired man from the hotel room. "They wanted to flush me out before the ball," Lachlan said, his face hardening into stone. "They failed." He turned to Serena. "You were right. Preston is the key, but we aren't going to fire him. We are going to use him." The Grand Oakhaven ballroom had been transformed into a Venetian fantasy. Masks, velvet drapes, and gondolas floating in the decorative fountains. It was the masquerade ball, the night Trey Kensington and the syndicate planned to end the Moretti bloodline. Serena was there, but she wasn't waiting tables. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk, a mask covered in sapphire feathers covering the upper half of her face. Lachlan had provided it. Tonight, she wasn't staff. She was a guest. "Can you hear me?" Lachlan's voice was a tiny whisper in her ear, via a microscopic earpiece. "Loud and clear," Serena murmured, sipping a martini she didn't want. She stood near the main entrance. "Leo is in the control room with my tech team," Lachlan said. "He knows the hotel schematics better than the architect. If anyone moves out of pattern, he will see it." It was a risky move, bringing Leo back to the hotel. But Leo had insisted. He claimed he needed to close the loop. Lachlan had quadrupled the security around the control room in the basement. Serena scanned the crowd. She saw Preston Walsh. He wasn't managing the floor tonight. He was standing near the emergency exit, sweating profusely, checking his watch every 30 seconds. "Target acquired," Serena whispered. "Preston is by the east exit." "Hold position," Lachlan commanded. "Wait for the contact." Lachlan himself was visible, sitting at a high-stakes baccarat table in the center of the room. He was the bait. He laughed loudly, played carelessly, acting the part of the distracted, aging lion Trey Kensington believed him to be. Suddenly, a figure approached Preston. It was a waiter, but Serena didn't recognize him. He handed Preston a napkin. "The drop is made," Serena said. "Preston has a note." Preston read the napkin, crumpled it, and nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card, a master key. He slipped it into the waiter's pocket. "The breach is initiated," Lachlan's voice came through, deadly calm. "Leo, what do you see?" Leo's voice cut in, surprisingly calm. He was looking at the security monitors in the basement. Camera 4, 7, and 9 are looping. The footage is fake. They are repeating the same 10 seconds. "Where are those cameras?" Lachlan asked. "Kitchen corridor, leading to the ballroom service lift," Leo recited. 3 men, carrying heavy instrument cases, cello cases. But the gate is wrong. Too heavy. Not cellos. "Weapons," Serena realized. "They're coming up the service lift behind the stage." "Serena," Lachlan said. "Intercept Preston. Don't let him leave. My men will handle the kitchen." Serena moved. She glided through the crowd, cutting off Preston, just as he turned to flee toward the lobby. "Going somewhere, Preston?" she asked, stepping in front of him. Preston blinked, confused by the mask. "Excuse me, miss. I have urgent." Serena lifted her mask slightly. Preston's jaw dropped. "More? What the hell are you?" "You gave them the master key," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You sold out the hotel. You sold out the people working here." "You don't understand," Preston hissed, grabbing her arm. "They were going to kill me. I owe money to the wrong people." "And now you owe a debt to the Morettis," she said. Suddenly, the ballroom lights flickered and died. Darkness engulfed the room. Screams erupted from the guests. "They cut the power!" Leo's voice cried out in her ear. "Pattern broken! Total darkness!" "Night vision," Lachlan commanded. Serena couldn't see anything, but she felt Preston try to run. She kicked his shin, hard. He yelped and fell. Pop, 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 pop. Muffled gunshots came from the stage area. "Serena, get down!" Lachlan shouted, but Serena didn't drop. She saw, or rather, felt, something wrong. The shots were coming from the stage, but the real threat wasn't there. "Leo!" she screamed into her mic. "Where is the anomaly? Where is the breathing?" "Balcony!" Leo shouted back, his voice high-pitched. "Heat signature, above the chandelier. One man, sniping position." The cellos in the kitchen had been a distraction. The real assassin was already in the rafters. Lachlan was on the floor, his guards forming a shield wall. But they were looking at the stage. The sniper on the balcony had a clear shot over their heads. Serena looked up. A tiny red laser dot cut through the darkness, searching for Lachlan. She was 20 feet away from the main breaker box on the wall, the emergency override. "Leo, guide me," she yelled. "I can't see." 12 steps forward, Leo commanded instantly, visualizing the grid of the room. "Turn 30 degrees right, 5 steps. Obstacle, waiter tray, jump!" Serena ran blind. She counted the steps. 1, 2, 3, 12. She turned. She leaped over the invisible tray she trusted was there. She landed, stumbling but upright. 3 steps. Wall. She hit the wall. Her hands frantically searched the velvet covering until she felt the cold metal of the panel. She ripped the door open and yanked the emergency lever. The emergency floodlights slammed on, blindingly bright white. The sudden glare dazzled the sniper on the balcony. He flinched, covering his eyes. That split second was all Lachlan needed. He saw the man in the rafters. He raised his pistol and fired once. The assassin tumbled from the balcony, crashing onto the buffet table below. Silence returned to the room, heavier than the darkness. Lachlan stood up, brushing glass from his tuxedo. He looked across the room at Serena, who was standing by the breaker box, chest heaving. He walked over to her, ignoring the screaming guests and the rushing security. "You trust him," Lachlan said, looking at her earpiece. "With my life," Serena replied. Lachlan took her hand. "Then let's go finish this. The head of the snake is still here." He turned toward the VIP booth, where Trey Kensington was cowering under a table. "Trey!" Lachlan's voice boomed, terrifyingly jovial. "The game isn't over. I believe you're all in." The silence that descended upon the grand Oakhaven ballroom was heavier than the crystal chandeliers overhead. Minutes ago, the air had been filled with the shrieks of the city's elite and the sharp crack of gunfire. Now, the only sound was the hum of the emergency floodlights and the ragged breathing of Trey Kensington. The smell of spent gunpowder hung in the air, an acrid intruder amidst the scent of expensive perfume and fear. Lachlan Moretti stood over Trey like a monolith carved from judgment and granite. His shadow stretched long across the polished marble floor, engulfing the trembling man who had tried to play God. Trey was on his knees, his expensive tuxedo ruined by spilled scotch and his own terror. He looked up at Lachlan, his eyes wide and wet. "Lachlan, please." "Wait. You have to understand. It was just business. A misunderstanding. I was pressured by the investors." "Pressured," Lachlan repeated. The word rolled off his tongue, soft but dangerously heavy, like a velvet-wrapped hammer. He took a slow step closer, the glass debris crunching beneath his dress shoes. "You threw a bread roll at my son 3 days ago, Trey. You laughed at his distress. Today, you tried to put a bullet in my head while hiding under a table. That is not business. That is an escalation. That is a chaotic, messy pattern. Lachlan didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise his hand. He simply existed in his terrifying stillness. Two of his personal guards moved forward from the shadows, hoisted Trey out of the booth by his armpits, and threw him to his knees in the absolute center of the room. The crowd of billionaires and socialites parted like the Red Sea, terrified of being caught in the splash zone of the Don's wrath. But the reckoning was far from finished. "Leo," Lachlan spoke into his earpiece, his gaze never leaving the sobbing hedge fund manager. "Is the perimeter secure?" The response didn't come through the earpiece alone. It boomed through the ballroom's main speaker system, startling the guests. The audio feed from the basement control room was being broadcast live, turning the entire gala into a witness box. "Perimeter secure," Leo's voice filled the room. It was calm, precise, and devoid of the panic that had gripped everyone else. "One anomaly remains. Pulse rate elevated. Sector 4, Table 2. Subject, Veronica St. Clair." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Hundreds of heads turned toward the fountain near the east wall. Veronica St. Clair stood there, frozen. She was clutching her beaded clutch bag so tightly that her knuckles were bone white. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes darting between the exits, finding every path blocked by Moretti's men. "Me?" Veronica screeched, her voice cracking as she tried to muster the arrogance that had shielded her for a lifetime. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm a victim here. This is insanity." Serena stepped out from the protective circle of guards. She walked past the cowering Trey, her midnight blue gown rustling softly. She stopped 10 feet from Veronica. With a slow, deliberate movement, she reached up and unfastened the sapphire-feathered mask, pulling it away to reveal the face of the waitress Veronica had mocked only days before. "You aren't a victim, Mrs. St. Clair," Serena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the ballroom, it rang clear as a bell. Trey didn't have the capital to hire a mercenary team like that. "We checked the ledgers. He's a hedge fund manager who has been hemorrhaging money for 6 months. He couldn't afford a getaway car, let alone a sniper." "Lies!" Veronica spat, though her trembling chin betrayed her. "You're just the help. You know nothing." "Leo checked the wire transfers," Serena continued, her gaze unwavering. $3 million moved from the St. Clair family trust to an offshore account in the Caymans yesterday at 4 p.m. The account belongs to the silver-haired man currently lying dead on the balcony. The accusation hung in the air, undeniable and damning. Veronica's face crumbled. The facade of the untouchable socialite dissolved, revealing the bitter, hateful woman beneath the layers of makeup and surgery. "He was supposed to end it," Veronica screamed, abandoning all pretense. She pointed a shaking finger at Lachlan. "He said the Moretti family was a disease. You bring your broken boy into our world, ruining our galas, making us look at him, making us feel uncomfortable. We shouldn't have to see that." The sheer cruelty of her words sucked the oxygen out of the room. But before Lachlan could step forward to silence her, the double doors swung open. Leo walked in. He was no longer wearing the noise-cancelling headphones. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that mirrored his father's. He didn't rush. He walked with a specific, rhythmic cadence, counting his steps, his eyes focused and clear. He navigated the debris on the floor as if following a map only he could see. He stopped directly in front of Veronica. He didn't flinch at her glare. He didn't rock. He stood in his own power. "I am not broken," Leo stated. His voice was flat, factual, and devastatingly firm. He tilted his head, looking at her with a clinical curiosity, as if she were a specimen under a microscope. "I see the patterns. You are the chaos. You are the noise. Your heart rate is currently 140 beats per minute. Your pupils are dilated. You are afraid. Leo took a small step closer, invading her personal space just enough to make her flinch. Why are you afraid? The triangle is fixed. The bad data is being removed. I am efficient. You are merely cruel. Lachlan stepped up beside his son. He placed a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder, not to hold him back and not to protect him, but as a gesture of immense, swelling pride. Gentlemen, Lachlan addressed the room, his voice booming. He swept his gaze over the crowd, locking eyes with the police commissioner and 2 federal judges who were in attendance as guests. It seems Mrs. St. Clair and Mr. Kensington have conspired to commit domestic terrorism, attempted murder, and conspiracy. I trust the law is capable of handling them, or do I need to handle it my way? The police commissioner, pale and sweating profusely, stepped forward immediately, nearly tripping in his haste. We will handle it, Mr. Moretti. Absolutely. Officers, arrest them both immediately. As uniformed officers swarmed in to drag Trey and Veronica away, Veronica screaming obscenities, Trey weeping into his hands, the ballroom remained in a state of shock. The civilized elite were terrified. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that the waitress and the boy they had ignored were the most powerful people in the room. In the periphery of the drama, near the emergency exit, a figure was trying to crawl away unnoticed. Preston Walsh, the manager, was inching toward the shadows, hoping to slip out before the doors were sealed. "Mr. Walsh!" Serena called out. Preston froze. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment before looking up. He was still on the floor where Serena had tripped him, his dignity completely stripped away. "You fired me for being 2 minutes late," Serena said, looking down at him. "You mocked Leo to his face, and tonight you sold out the safety of every single guest in this hotel for a bribe. I can explain, Serena. Please," Preston whimpered, wringing his hands. "I didn't know they would shoot. I just thought they were going to rob the place. I have debts, Serena. You understand debts." "I understand poverty," Serena corrected him coldly. "I don't understand betrayal. And you don't need to explain to me. You need to explain to the new owner of the hotel." Preston looked confused, his brow furrowing. "The new owner?" Lachlan stepped forward, casting a shadow over his former manager. "I bought the Grand Oak Haven this morning at 9 a.m. It was a distressed asset, considering the glaring security flaws I identified. I needed a safe place for my son to practice his social skills without being assaulted by bread rolls." Lachlan looked at Preston with the kind of disgust one usually reserves for something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "You are trespassing on private property, Mr. Walsh. Get out of my building. If I see you in this city again, you will simply cease to exist." Preston scrambled to his feet, slipping on the polished floor in his haste. He didn't look back. He ran out the service doors, disappearing into the rainy night, stripping off his manager's jacket as he went. The danger was finally over. The adrenaline that had been fueling Serena for the last hour suddenly evaporated, leaving her legs feeling like jelly. The room spun slightly. She swayed, her vision blurring at the edges. Immediately, a hand caught her. It was firm and steady. "Steady," Leo said, holding her upright. He looked into her eyes, checking for dilation. "Equilibrium check. 1, 2, 3. Serena blinked, the room coming back into focus. She looked at Leo and smiled, hot tears stinging her eyes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Leo." "You saved the pattern," Leo said seriously, releasing her only when he was sure she could stand. "You are the variable that fixed the equation." Lachlan approached them. The terrifying Don, the man who made the city tremble, looked at Serena with an expression of profound, naked gratitude. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a thick cream envelope. "Serena," he said softly, ignoring the hundreds of eyes watching them. "This is the deed to a house in the Western Hills. It is fully paid for. And inside is also the paperwork for a trust fund dedicated to your mother's medical care. St. Jude's has already been notified. She is being moved to a private suite with the best specialists as we speak." Serena stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled. "Lachlan, I can't take this. It's too much. I just did what was right. You gave me back my son," Lachlan said, his voice thick with emotion he struggled to suppress. "You saw him when the world looked away. You entered a war zone for him. That is a debt that can never be fully repaid. But this is a start." He paused, glancing at Leo, who was now calmly adjusting his cufflinks to ensure they were perfectly symmetrical. "And," Lachlan added, "I have a job offer. The Moretti Foundation needs a director. Someone to run the new programs for neurodivergent young adults. Someone who understands that different isn't broken. Someone who will fight for them the way you fought for him." Serena looked at the deed, the promise of safety for her mother. She looked at Leo, the young man who had found his voice because she had offered him a dance. She thought of the years of struggle, the bus rides in the rain, the cruelty of men like Preston and women like Veronica. She took the envelope. She took the future. "I accept," she whispered. 3 months later. The charity gala was in full swing, but it was unlike any event the city had ever seen. The music was soft, a gentle acoustic ensemble rather than a blaring orchestra. The lighting was warm and amber, devoid of strobes or harsh flashes. There were quiet zones lined with velvet pillows and sensory toys where guests could retreat if the night became too much. Serena stood on the balcony, watching the guests below. It was a beautiful mix. The city's elite mingled with families who had children on the spectrum, children who had never been welcome at such events before. "Director Moore." Serena turned. Leo stood there. He looked relaxed, his shoulders low, a small smile playing on his lips. "The waltz is starting," Leo said. "It is in 3/4 time, a perfect triangle rhythm. The acoustics are optimal." He held out a hand. "Will you dance?" Serena smiled, her heart full. She took his hand. "I'd love to, Leo." They walked onto the dance floor. The crowd parted, not out of fear this time, but out of genuine respect. Lachlan Moretti stood on the sidelines, holding a glass of sparkling cider, watching his son lead the woman who had saved their souls. As the music swelled, Leo didn't rock back and forth. He didn't cover his ears. He counted the beat, looked Serena in the eye, and spun her gently into the light. 1, 2, 3, he whispered, his voice confident. 1, 2, 3, she echoed. And for the first time in the history of the Moretti family, everything was perfect. And that is how a simple act of kindness brought down an empire of cruelty. Serena proved that true power isn't about fear or money. It's about seeing the humanity in others when everyone else looks away. She didn't just save Leo. She saved herself and taught a ruthless Mafia. Don the meaning of family. It's a reminder that the person you ignore today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good always triumphs over evil. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.